In this video, I plan to lay out a very simple test I'm calling the Tyranny Test, which can be used to determine if or to what extent the United States is in trouble being taken over by tyrants. Now, this is a timeless test, so anyone could use this simple test 10 years ago or 10 years from now. But before we jump in, I have to do a tiny bit of background work just to establish the intellectual presuppositions and the controls of this test. So the thing that makes us Americans, it's never based around our ethnicity or even specific culture. Rather, it's our commitment to certain ideals, to freedom. It's extremely difficult to find a country around the globe that has such a melting pot of cultures, but are still united because of the rallying around an idea. And for us, it's our idea of freedom. It's our Constitution. It's stubborn, joyful, risky, and bold freedom. So the founders of the United States sought to crystallize our commitment to freedom by identifying our natural rights to freedom and then limiting what the government was and was not allowed to do through forming what we'd call the U.S. Constitution. Now, what they're attempting to do while escaping tyranny and seeing the historical certainty that tyranny always slowly or quickly rose to conquer freedom was they wanted to make a country that was, in a sense, tyranny-proof. And so, to this end, the Constitution was created as the highest law in the land. The people have certain rights that simply cannot be touched by the government. The First Amendment was to be the most important, and the Second Amendment, they agreed, was the next most important. That's why they made them in that order. The First Amendment goes like this: Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, the right of the people peacefully to assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. And here's the Second Amendment. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of the free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, these amendments are extremely succinct on purpose. They're meant to limit the government with no gray areas or wiggle room. It's like when God gives his 10 commandments, thou shalt not steal being one of them. There's no room for discussion or alibis. It's simply, hey, don't steal under any circumstance. It's not good to take other people's stuff. So let's review what these amendments are really driving at, and then will be our tyranny test. So here we go. The First and Second Amendments limit the government's ability to take away or infringe upon the people's right to practice their own religion, speak freely, report and hear the news, peacefully get together, and to petition the government over things that they think the government's doing wrong, whether they're misusing their authority or overstepping their limits. Now, here's the tyranny test. You look at this list that are the most important amendments, and then you ask, is the government infringing upon these rights? Now, here's a quick caution. Tyrants seeking to convert a free people to a dominated people will rarely attack these rights without churching it up a bit. With good intentions. So they'll want to take away your right to assemble. It'll be for your safety. And that's the same with the argument for guns. We're taking away this away, but it's for your safety, so it's okay. If the government wants to take away your ability to speak the truth plainly, then they're going to argue that it's about safeguarding equality or safety. In other words, your freedom will die by 1,000 cuts at the feet of a god called good intentions. But the result's always going to be the same. You're going to become a slave to the state, a massive, powerful, manipulative state. Now, this is the exact same thing that happened in Venezuela. It happened exactly like this in Cuba and in China and the Soviet Union. We just suck at history and we're being manipulated by propaganda. Don't be fooled. So, returning to our list. Has the right to freely exercise your religion been attacked? So whether it's praying in schools, pulling commandments off the wall of a building, telling a person you won't participate in their wedding because it conflicts with your religious beliefs, has your right to freely believe what you want to believe being attacked? Is there a propaganda war at large that seeks to demonize you and your beliefs? Now, if you're a Hollywood actor, per se, like Chris Pratt, who admits to being a Christian, what was the backlash for him? Now, with regard to this piece of the First Amendment, I will say, in my opinion, that we do have a freedom to practice our religion. Though the socio-political cost is greater than ever, I think that's because of the freedoms that enumerated in this list. This one's the biggest hurdle to the tyrant. And so it's going to be the one that falls very last. But it must fall because to the tyrant, no allegiance will be permitted that's higher than that of the government. Government must become your god. They have to relegate everything else. What about your right to free speech? Can you speak the truth freely? Or do you feel instead this great pressure on you to keep silent? Is some speech now considered off limits? And not because it's profane or because it's threatening physical violence, which quite obviously not free from consequence. I'm talking about speech that's not permitted because the ideas seem dangerous to someone who just doesn't like them. Do you see widespread censorship by those who control the flow of information? Does academia welcome different perspectives for a free battlefield or a free battle of ideas? Do you feel heard? Or do you instead find this muzzle of political correctness as you walk in a tightrope of all the things you can't talk about for fear of offending someone? This is also old tyrant's trick to stop dissenting views. The first thing Hitler did in his rush for tyrannical power was to silence the intelligentsia. Those professors, those academics who might intellectually and ideologically challenge his views. If you're smart and brave, you must be silenced. With this, he also burned books. Here's the free speech test. Do you see books being outlawed and canceled? If so, what political persons or what political party is behind the movement? And there's your villain. There's your wolf dressed up as a sheep. Okay, so back to our list. We have next the freedom of the press. Now, before jumping into this one, I've got to first ask and hold up, do we really still even have a free press? The Washington Post, as far back as 2014, reported that less than 7% of journalists were conservative. 7%. But you know, I don't really even need to think about this question in statistics to have some clarity on it. All I need to do is look at the reporting of a conservative news outlet, say Daily Wire, and then compare that to something like CNN or the New York Times or any number of the other really big players. And the difference is shocking. It's outrageous, the different coverage of the same events. Now, on its face, to me, it kind of seems good. That different news organizations could report on an extremely different way. After all, isn't that a sign that the freedom abounds because contrary thought is being expressed, right? It's like, oh, that's freedom. See, they disagree. Well, not exactly, because when I look at the institutions of power, notice big tech, Hollywood, the universities, the legislative branch, the executive branch, the crushing majority of all the media are all leaning way left, just like 93% or more of the journalists. Now, also, this is out of sync with the general population's belief, but also Ben Shapiro, for instance, gets more engagement individually than the entirety of CNN News. Yet he'll never trend on Twitter or YouTube. Why? How is that even possible? And it starts to dawn on the reasonable thinker that our press is now completely ideologically driven and bought by lefty institutions of power. How many negative pieces were done on Donald Trump? Thousands. And how many positive? Zero. The big mainstream media, the lefty, zero. It's like, wow, he never did anything good in 4 years. Nothing. Maybe you hate him, maybe he sucked, but nothing good in 4 years. I don't believe the institution of the press is intact enough to pose the question, is it free? Journalism is dead amongst the mainstream media, and all I can see is ideologically driven activism. They don't report the news as far as I can see. They report a twisted, manipulative narrative that I think many Americans are wising up to. I don't trust the legacy media. I don't trust what I'm seeing on CNN at all. And so I moved on to other places like Blaze TV or Daily Wire, and there's a few other places where our patriotic resistance fighters have congregated to speak the truth. All right, so back to our list. So far we've covered in the First Amendment, freedom of religion, speech, press, and now let's do the right to assemble. Nope, I think this one's untouched. Now, back away slowly. You're not actually allowed to be near me. You're masked. You've already been sick. You've been vaccinated, and still you can't meet together because of, reasons. Don't you see? The right to assemble. Lastly, in the First Amendment is the right to petition the government over our grievances over it. Yes, we still can sue and question the government today. However, the strange thing about the difference of today is the size disparity between the person and the government. I've heard Dennis Prager point out that when the government is big, the person is small in terms of their power. You know, there's that struggle. And generations before, our tiny government was easy to keep in check. But now, our sitting president, who will not hold press conferences just indefinitely, we haven't seen such little engagement in the history of the executive office. And now he's protected by newly erected wall around the White House. And it's been silently cramming through massive pieces of legislation via executive order. In other words, democracy itself is being sidestepped. And Biden claimed prior to his presidential win that cramming stuff through via executive action, referring to if Trump was doing that, it would be tyrannical. He has literally outed himself, therefore, as being a tyrant. Awesome. So there's that. Okay, now to the Second Amendment. By the way, guns are cool. I want to recite it again. A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It's important to point out that the founders used language here that was to give the government zero ability to take even away a small amount of the citizens' rights to be armed to the teeth. At the time this was written, the citizenry had the same weapons that the army would have. And there wasn't a standing army at first, but pop ahead and it's true. Individuals own rifles, they own cannons, even some citizens owned warships. In today's terms, that'd be like you being able to have the same types of guns the military had, as well as maybe a fully functioning tank. Now, for the people listening in that are a bit more naive in 18th century weapons of war, understand that a big cannonball blasted into a crowd could easily kill and wound more people than someone today with a fully automatic M16. The Second Amendment was not limited to muskets any more than the First Amendment was free speech only limited to quill pens. It's technology proof. The Second Amendment is about protecting the people from a tyrannical government. So it stands to reason, guys, that the citizens would need similar weaponry to that of a military soldier would have access to. If people are only allowed to have slingshots, while the soldier has a machine gun, you can see that the whole purpose for the Second Amendment would be completely emptied of its power. You got to have the same. Now, you listening in are probably thinking of all the things that could go wrong with such an amazing amount of freedom. Couldn't deranged people hurt innocents using these weapons? Well, yeah, they could, and throughout our entire national and even world history, evil people have always used weapons of war to prey upon the innocent. That's always going to be true. But we as a society can endure these tragic events. We can survive it, but what we cannot endure is a tyrannical government because there's no way to regain your freedom. Remember, you can vote yourselves into something like socialism or communism, but you have to shoot your way out of it. And as I say that, I'm reminded of a Benjamin Franklin quote. He said, "Those who give up a little essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety." And that's so true today. It's not about safety, it's about freedom. So now let's return to our tyranny test at present. Is the Second Amendment under attack? And ignore the good intentions those attacking may claim and just simply ask, is the country we've lived in for centuries, with our constitutional foundation intact. Is it under radical attack now? Which political persons and what political parties are attacking your Second Amendment? There are your tyrants. You can be a good American and be personally against guns, but you cannot possibly be a good American and be against the rights of the people to own guns. Because our Constitution makes us Americans, and to oppose the Constitution is to oppose America. Follow? You can't be a good American and be anti-right to own guns. Beware anyone that infringes upon the Second Amendment. The right to bear arms shall not be infringed. But what if it is? What if new laws are drawn up? They say you cannot own guns or ammo or that or any other law that seeks to infringe upon your constitutional rights. What if that happened? Well, one could reason that since the Constitution is the highest law of our land, that any contradictory law is an illegal law and you don't have to follow it. For the new laws to stand, a new amendment would have to be created by the government that nullifies the Second Amendment. Like we outlawed, there was the Prohibition era, and then we're like, yeah, that was a terrible idea, and then we made alcohol legal again. That'd have to happen, and we're far from being able for that to be able to happen. But if the Second Amendment was to be legally destroyed, that's the way to do it. As it stands, again, someone could argue any law contradicting the Second Amendment is an illegal law. You get to have your guns, guys, and ammo. And because we warrior poets are loving protectors of the innocent, and because we're lovers of freedom, I encourage you to get guns and never, ever, ever give them up. Bury them before you surrender them, but never give them up. Love you all, and I'm honored to be in the company of you who are committed to lovingly protect others and safeguard our precious freedoms. You're patriots, you're lovers of mankind. Yeah, God bless. Train hard, train smart. Stay free.